everyone! So at the beginning of November I finally finished my university semester, which means I had plenty more free time to finally start reading books for fun again, which means I read quite a few books in November and I'm here to show you which ones I did manage to complete. First we'll start with a book I started in October and finished in November. This is The Last Tycoon by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I had to read this for one of my literature classes. This was F. Scott Fitzgerald's last novel. It actually remains uncompleted as he died before he was able to finish the manuscript. I thought it was a really interesting read, reading something that wasn't actually finished, and I think especially for someone who's so precise like F. Scott Fitzgerald, you could really tell that he hadn't gone through and fixed every single little detail like he does in many of his other novels. I can't say I really liked any of the characters in this one, and I definitely don't think it ranks anywhere near the other books of his that I absolutely love or his short stories, but I'm really glad that I have read it. He is one of my favorite authors, so it was nice to see what he was doing when he died. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I picked up one that's talked about heaps here on YouTube. This is Sex Criminals Volume 1, One Weird Trick by Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky. This is a comic book bind-up, so it's got, I think like 1 to 5 of the comic books bound up in a graphic novel style print. This was a really funny read. I thought it was going to be funny and I wasn't disappointed. It's basically about 2 characters who can stop time when they orgasm, and they find each other accidentally and then go on wild adventures together. I thought it was really funny and I am looking forward to picking up the second volume. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I picked up an ARC that I received for being a volunteer at the Sydney Writers' Festival this year, and this is The Other Side of the World by Stephanie Bishop. This kind of focuses on a multiracial, biracial couple from England, a white woman and an English Indian man, and they immigrate to Australia, and kind of the effects that that has on their relationship, their conceptions of place, their conceptions of self, and their families more generally. I think it's an interesting concept that perhaps hasn't been explored in exactly the way that Bishop did it in this one, but I do think I've read this story before, especially in Australia. I think I've read a lot of books about English people struggling to cope with Australia. I found particularly the fact that she's a white woman and wrote a huge chunk of this book from an Indian Englishman's perspective. I found it really confronting, her conceptualizations of his race and his ideas of racism. She uses some really foul language when she's speaking from his perspective, and I found that really difficult to read. And it really put me off, honestly. I didn't enjoy that part. Other than that, it was a pretty standard read. I think this is her debut novel, so it was alright. If you're interested in that kind of subject matter, you might like this one. But like I said, I think I've read this story before, and the different aspects that she added to this didn't add to the story at all, in my opinion. I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. Okay, so it's a few hours after those first previous clips were filmed. My camera battery died while I was filming, so I've had to charge it, and that means the lighting is going to be different, the setup of the camera is going to be a little bit different, my makeup looks a little bit different, but we're just going to go with it because it's the only day I have to film this. Okay, as I was saying, I picked up this next book because it won the Man Booker in 2005. I was really excited to read it because it is sort of a classic, and not many people talk about this one, but I was really interested in it, and that's The Sea by John Banville. I was really hoping to like this book, but I actually really hated it. It's an old white man talking about how he used to be really young and horny, and then going into minute detail of every negative characteristic of every woman he's ever met. I really hated it. I couldn't understand why it's won the Man Booker, and I didn't enjoy it at all. I gave it 1 out of 5 stars. Then I picked up another really well-loved YouTube book. This is Saga Volume 1 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. This is also a bind-up of some comics. I think, again, it's 1 to 5 or 1 to 4. I can't remember, sorry. I was a little bit hesitant about this. It's very sci-fi based. It follows this couple who have an illegal marriage and have birthed a child in the middle of a war zone. I absolutely loved this. I think the voice of the narrator is fantastic. realistic. I think the art is really lovely. There's a bit of gruesomeness, and it is pretty MA 15 plus in content. There's a lot of sexual references, a lot of sexual images, and a lot of violence and graphic images as well. So not for younger children, but I thought it was really excellent. Not something I usually read, but I will absolutely be picking up the rest of this series. I think it's great. So I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I picked up my first ever Donna Tartt. This is The Little Friend. She's also famous for writing The Goldfinch and The Secret History. This was one of her earlier novels after The Secret History but before The Goldfinch, and it follows a little girl named Harriet. It follows her 10 years after her older brother was killed or killed himself or just generally died, and she's trying to solve the mystery of his death. The storytelling in this novel was excellent. There are so many characters, and they're weaved in. Their stories are very well fleshed out, and I really enjoyed getting to know all of the characters. It's a really heart-wrenching ending. The whole story is quite sad. It starts out with the death of a little boy and doesn't end very nicely either, but I really enjoyed this novel. I only spent a couple days with it, even though it is over 700 pages, because Donna Tartt tells stories really well. If nothing else, this made me want to read both The Goldfinch and The Secret History immediately, because I really enjoyed the way she told this story. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Next, we have another really popular YouTube story. This is The Martian by Weir. Recently, it was made into a movie starring Matt Damon, and it follows the story of Mark, who is stranded on Mars after his exploration team leaves him behind. It follows him for over a year living on Mars, surviving, and all the different trials and tribulations he gets put through. What I really loved about this story is that, well, one, Mark is really funny. He tells the story really funnily, lots of humor, lots of sarcasm, which was really fun to read. Also, he's a herbologist, and I really loved the fact that the knowledge he had about growing plants in space was actually based in his job and not just a fact that he happened to know, which I find with a lot of survival stories, there's no justification for the knowledge they have to survive. They're just kind of really gifted at surviving, and I don't buy it. This, on the other hand, made a lot of sense. He's a herbologist and an engineer, and that's how he survives. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Then I picked up a story that not many people know about. This is Almost Sincerely by Zoe Norton Lodge. Zoe is a Australian comedian personality type of media presence. She appears on The Checkout as well as a few of the different shows that The Chaser has put out over the years. She's a very funny, very intelligent woman, and this is her memoir. It's basically set in Annandale in Sydney, where she grew up, and it just has a ton of different chapters which tell stories about her and her family and growing up in Sydney. I did enjoy it. I think the thing I didn't love so much is Zoe Norton Lodge has a really aggressive style of humor that I didn't find particularly funny. But, I mean, if you like that kind of thing, it is a funny read, and I just enjoy reading about women who are prominent in Australian media and finding out where they started. I kind of find that really interesting. So I enjoyed this one, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I picked up a graphic novel. This is a graphic novel, not a bind-up or anything. This is Jimmy Corrigan, The Smartest Kid on Earth by... No, I don't know who wrote it. By Chris Ware. This I often think of as a classic graphic novel. It's one of the first graphic novels I ever heard of, and it's one that people reference all the time. I think of this often as graphic novel canon, and I was really excited to pick it up at a secondhand sale for relatively cheap from the children's section. Shouldn't have been there, but it was really cheap from that section. The art in it is quite monotone almost, and with some pops of color. I did really enjoy the way that it looks. I think what I struggled with in this graphic novel is it's not for people who don't read graphic novels very often. It's definitely not a beginner graphic novel. Following the story between the panels often got a little bit muddled. Occasionally there are arrows to let you know which panel goes after which panel, but at multiple times I found myself reading panels and then having to go back because I'd read them in the wrong order and it didn't end up in the right place at the end, and that I found really frustrating. Also, the beginning of the story, so there are 2 perspectives told in this story, and the distinction between them I found really disjointed and I didn't follow it. So I started a new story thinking it was still talking about the old characters, and especially considering they have the same name, it got a little bit confusing for me. So the first half I didn't enjoy. The second half really picked up and I actually liked it a lot. So it tells two stories. One is Jimmy Corrigan going back to meet his estranged father, and the other story is Jimmy Corrigan's grandfather and his relationship with his dad back in the Victorian era or the 1930s. Actually, I have no idea. Probably should have looked that up. So even though I didn't enjoy the first half, the second half really pulled it through and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The last book that I picked up and finished in November was You'll Be Sorry When I'm Dead by Marieke. This is another memoir of another prominent Australian woman in the media. She's a comedian, a writer. She's been a screenwriter for a number of years, far longer than she's done anything else as far as I can tell. She also used to be an actor when she was younger, and most people know her now from the book club on ABC. I'm a huge fan of Marieke. I think she's really funny. I really love the way she presents herself and the way she's really eloquent on the TV shows she appears in. I think she's very intelligent. I really like watching her. So I was very interested to pick this up. This is her memoir that she wrote in 2011. Each chapter tells a different part of her life, talks about something a little bit different. I thought it was a little bit confused in the fact it's not chronological, but that's just a preference I have with memoirs. I prefer them to be chronological if they can be. Otherwise, I spend a lot of time trying to put it in order and it detracts from me reading the stories. I found this a really honest memoir. I thought she painted herself in a particular light and it wasn't necessarily always sympathetic. I really liked learning about all these different histories that she had with different people and different careers and all the background that brought her to where I know her from today. I thought it was quite funny, but I don't think if you don't like Marieke or don't know who she is, you need to pick this up. I don't think this will be life-changing unless you know and admire her already, but I'm definitely glad to have picked this up and finished it. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. And other than those books, I also picked up but have not yet finished another novel. This is Back to Blood by Tom Wolfe. I picked this up a bit on a whim secondhand a few years ago and it's just been sitting on my shelf ever since. I've heard good and bad things about Tom Wolfe, so I was a little bit hesitant, and also this book is massive, so I didn't really want to spend a lot of time reading something I wasn't going to enjoy, and it made me put off picking it up. I finally picked it up because I'm now on holidays, and I think it's one of the weirdest novels I've ever read. I actually have no idea how to think about this novel or how to approach it. I'm about halfway through and I think I will finish it, but I'm not enjoying it. It's set in Miami and has a lot of focus on the difference between Anglo-Saxon and Cuban Florida residents. And there's a bit of racial discussion, but I don't think it's particularly nuanced. And all of the characters are hyper melodramatic, and I don't really care about any of them because it feels like Tom Wolfe hates everyone in this story, so I don't know why I should like them if the author hates them. So far, nothing has really happened. I don't know if anything will happen. It's got a lot of cops in it, so I don't know why there isn't some sort of like murder mystery or crime mystery. So those are all the books that I picked up in the month of November, and now I'm going to show you some ones that I will pick up in the month of December, or that I'm planning to. Firstly, I'd like to finish Back to Blood by Tom Wolfe. Hopefully, I don't know, sooner rather than later, I'm hoping. But after that, then I would like to pick up, this is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the Trilogy of 4 by Douglas Adams. This is a bind-up of all 4 novels from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. I've had friends telling me to read this series for many, many years, and one of my friends gave this collection to me for my 21st birthday in March of this year. So I would really like to get onto this one. I know it's an absolute classic, it is referenced all the time, and I would really like to pick it up now because it is massive, and I'd like to just devour this in a couple of sittings over these holidays. And hopefully I will, and hopefully I'll enjoy it. I hope it's funny. I think it's supposed to be funny, but I'm hoping it's really funny. Next, this is Rough Music by Patrick Gale. I got this as a present, but it was a blind date with a book present, so I didn't know, I didn't know what book I was getting when I got it. It's supposed to be a family story covering 3 generations, starting with an idyllic, though definitely strange childhood and ending in tragedy. It's an Australian novel, sounds very much like every Australian novel, set on the beach, involving some sort of tragedy. I have no idea what it's about, but I'd like to get through it because it's been sitting on my shelf for quite a while and I just kind of want to know what it's about. Then I'll be picking up Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This was published, I think, in 2014, maybe 2013, and nobody has ever stopped talking about it since. It follows some artists after the end of the world, I think, is basically the synopsis. I've got friends who've read it and said it was awesome, and I've wanted to read it for a really long time, so I'd like to pick it up now and hopefully blow through it really quickly, but that's what I'm hoping to read in December. And this is the last book I hope to read in December. I know I will be reading much more than just these ones, but this is the last one I'm planning on reading definitely next month. This is The Natural Way of Things by Charlotte Wood. This is a really recent publication in Australia, and I've not heard anyone say a single bad thing about it, honestly. It's been hailed as one of the best novels of all time, and it's supposed to be incredibly feminist, incredibly challenging, really confronting, and I'm just really excited to read it. I think the cover art is absolutely beautiful, and I'm just really psyched to get into this one. I put it off for a little while because super hyped things also make me really nervous, and I'm a little worried that I'm not gonna love it, but I think I will, and even if I don't, that's alright. That's just the way of things. So there you go. Those are the books that I read in November and the books I'd like to read in December. If you have read any of these books, please let me know what you thought of them down below. If you have any suggestions based on the books I've mentioned here, also leave them down below. If you make to-be-reads or wrap-up videos, please link them for me down below. Do everything down below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.